we are eager to hear your story.
Sure, thanks. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Martin from Xaxis. For those of you who know who Xaxis is, we provide programmatic advertising products to brands to help them achieve their business outcomes. So what I'd like to do today is just share with you a couple of trends that certainly we've been experiencing within Xaxis in terms of the way consumer insights are driving business outcomes. The first thing I just wanted to comment on was really, I guess, broadly speaking, consumer insight has been sort of coming from sort of two different sources. Firstly, from surveys, research surveys, and that, of course, has been around for decades. And the second, of course, is also from sort of user-level databases or some sort like that. Again, those have been around for decades as well, certainly from clients' perspective. And then I guess more recently, over the last sort of 10, maybe 15 years, we've seen a rise in lots of third-party user-level databases as well. I guess what we also sort of see is both of these insights come from both of these sorts of sources have been, by and large, fairly siloed out. You typically find your researchers sort of tucked away over there, and you've kind of got these sort of behavioural analysts, data scientists, sort of sitting somewhere else in the organisation. So often, quite often, not very married up. Consumer databases and user-level databases have been great, of course, for providing personalisation and relevance for one-to-one level communications. And they're very good for telling you sort of the what, when, and how of things, but perhaps are less good about giving you some insight around sort of why consumers are taking certain decisions as they are. On the flip side of that, consumer insight is fantastic for giving you perhaps the why element of that, but is less granular, is less rich around the sort of the what, the when, the how, these sorts of things. And I guess sort of frustratingly, sometimes traditional research, you've not been able to take some of these great insights and directly go to market and inform relevance on a one-to-one level. Typically what you have to do with sort of market research is use sort of proxy, certainly in the media world, using sort of age and gender or sort of income type data to sort of kind of to use that in sort of from consumer databases that you might have somewhere else. So what we're sort of finding in Xaxis is, and we've seen elsewhere as well, they're actually starting to marry these things two sources together much more closely. So we now have techniques to basically take consumer research, take the panelists and their responses, and directly integrate that into your user-level databases. And then from that, from the sort of a few hundred or maybe a few thousand sample responses that you've got, then actually scale that using sort of lookalike techniques to score out your entire user database, and therefore activate those sorts of responses from your survey into sort of one-to-one communications. So just to give you a quick example of one of these, so this is some work that we did with sort of General Mills for their Old El Paso brand. We had to, first of all, identify who the Old El Paso shopper was. We wanted to make sure we had sort of, once we knew who they were, we had to have some sort of audience so we could scale for programmatic media and target them. And of course, they were very interested in obviously measuring the outcome of that and understanding what that did. So what did that look like? That essentially meant using some sort of research survey to understand who the shopper was and what their characteristics were and so on and so forth. And then once we kind of carried out that survey and done some segmentation on that, we then joined that up to our user-level database. We were able to scale that through sort of lookalike modeling techniques, and then you've got a much bigger sort of millions of sort of user-type profiles for each sort of key segment, and then connect that into your sort of programmatic media targeting environments such as DSPs and things like that, which of course we did, ran the campaign, and then we were able to measure the impact of this. Now, in this particular case, they were really interested in in-store sales, and we didn't have the ability to kind of measure first-hand shopper purchases. But again, so we had to turn to a survey there to kind of blend that in with the behavioural data that we have, and again, measure the business impact off that, which in this particular case was 18%. So, showing you how we can take sort of a traditional research and really activate that through kind of programmatic media through kind of behavioural databases and drive a real business outcome. The other trend I just sort sort of comment on too, I think it's sort of been discussed already throughout the conference as well, is just really obviously time to insight can often be sort of tediously slow. You've got lots of people working and spending a lot of time kind of drafting, trying to pull this insight together, and sometimes it can take, it's not quite often, it can take weeks or months to kind of get to where we want to get to. And I think what we're sort of seeing now, and it's already been talked about in one of the roundtables earlier this week, we've seen it with people from, in some of the other conferences earlier today, but really we're able to sort of get to that insight through machine learning techniques in sort of minutes or hours, and some people would say claim in seconds as well in some cases. So I think sort of machine learning is starting to kind of change the way that consumer insight is generated on some of these sorts of things. So again, this is sort of an example. So we've sort of found that there's many people out there. IBM Watson is one of these people who's been sort of touted around as well in terms of in this conference, and I think some of the dashboard guys have been talking about this. And this is less to do with sort of just using a dashboard and presenting what sort of happened in the past, but more talking about how dashboards can reveal perhaps actual drivers of from big data sets that are actually generating big specific outcomes. So in this particular case, I actually stood up yesterday a little bit and talked about sort of some work we did with GSK and Panadol, and sort of I didn't really have time to talk about it yesterday, but one of the things that was involved in that also was basically some sort of audience clustering at sort of scale, and it was sort of really automated, so taking kind of insight into all of the different sort of people who are visiting the website and sort of clustering that work in 30 minutes, and hey presto, we had sort of 7 key kind of segments that we understood and could then use that for programmatic media, but also then provide insight back into sort of broader plannings and other people who are not involved in sort of the day-to-days of programmatic media. So, I mean, obviously, sort of, the machine learning is not going to solve all of our problems at the moment. I think, machine learning in terms of revealing consumer insight is great when the data sets are kind of somewhat structured. Unfortunately, in marketing, we do have some great structured data sets, but we also have to deal with lots of fragmented data and trying to join that all together. So there's still a long way to go, I think, in sort of automating all of our consumer insight, so to speak. But I think, yeah, just to summarize, 2 trends I sort of see at the moment. One is really sort of the joining up of research with sort of user-level databases somehow, and bringing those two things together. And the other one, of course, is through the techniques of machine learning and just really speeding up that consumer insight generation as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. Let's see, questions from the audience. Over here, second row.
Could each of your speakers tell us what your definition of a consumer insight is? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. So what is the definition of consumer insights? Interestingly, we were talking about that among ourselves here. So who would like to start?
One of the definition of consumer insight would be how does their response and triggered to incur the conversion. So in this particular case, we think, based on our understanding, of course, the open up is one of these emotion. I think this is a topic that was well discussed in the panel here. And emotion itself may be an important trigger to incur conversion. For us, the marketing have 2 subtype of question. One is a revisiting rate, the other is actual conversion. Revisiting does not mean conversion. And how can we move the last mile, maybe 10 feet, make the conversion occur and promote to the right person? I think that would be some of the insight could be helped in the near real-time condition.
In my opinion, I think the customer insight is something. Imagine that the word you don't have any information. All the insights or all the behavior of the customer is a mystery, for example. And then you begin to prospect this information, begin to prospect what the customer behavior, what the data they provide to you, and then you can take a look at this data and see what's the behavior can be right now that you can see. So I believe that insights came from of course, in somehow analytics, when you see what the data is provided to you and see what kind of behavior this customer has, and you didn't know about it before you have the access to the information. So, of course, there is another part of the insights that came from the human being, that's the creativity. So I think that this is going to be, when you put these two things in balance, you can have the insight for what customer can need to from you.
I mean, for me, Xaxis consumer insight is ultimately linked to the business decision that you're trying to make, right? So that really ultimately drives what sort of consumer insight you're after. So for us at Xaxis, we provide media targeting, so we have to understand the audiences that are out there that we're trying to reach. So it's about trying to provide insight and find out who are the audiences that are relevant for that particular brand. Some of that insight that we generate or have at our disposal also might inform content or creative decisions as well, so to speak. So, that's a different type of business decision, and that requires a different type of consumer insight, perhaps. So I think you have to link it back to the decisions that you're trying to solve here a little bit.
Yeah, I want to build on that. So I share that wholeheartedly from a business standpoint. Ultimately, it is about solving business problems. And an insight means, and especially now with all these techniques, it means a very close understanding of the customer, who they are, their needs, and how can a brand and the product make a connection with that individual. And I think now we are seeing some approaches that are surfacing that are getting us very close to doing just that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be interesting to look at the future, like where is all this going?
Yeah, I think I'd just add, maybe I didn't sort of mention it before, but sort of obviously the traditional way of doing things was maybe a little bit slow. And so that obviously could only inform certain types of business decisions, maybe your quarterly review or something like that, right? Whereas, if machine learning really takes off and speeds up that consumer insight generation, that potentially opens it up to new types of decisions and faster decision making, so to speak. How long those decisions actually take is a different question, so to speak. That's a different thing. But the surfacing of the insight can potentially open that up to new types of decisions.
Thank you. So the other things I would like to emphasize is your customer behavior can be modified. So you need to find the proper trigger to modify their behavior, grow with your customer together. That's a win-win situation.
Thank you. I think we have 13 seconds left. Short question? Anybody? No? Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you, our panel. Thank you.